Once upon a time, there was a young girl who lived with her mother in a cottage on the outskirts of the woods. The girl's father had gone off to fight in the war, so the two women made a living by selling the plants in their garden. They had quite a successful business. Rising before dawn, the women pruned their vegetables and plucked their fruits down from the trees. The people of their town greatly respected these women, and often there was a line as far as the eye could see down their dirt road. One day, the girl was awoken by a knocking coming from their bedroom window. The girl went to the window and discovered a shiny black crow sitting on their sill. The crow hopped towards the girl, dropping a golden package in her hand, and began to speak. "Dearest young girl, your life is not what it appears to be. Your mother has fallen ill and will perish if you do not take action immediately." The girl glanced over her shoulder at the sleeping figure of her mother in bed. The crow continued. "To help her escape her fate, you must find the oldest tree in all of the forest and retrieve a sliver of bark from its center ring. Then, you must plant the sliver in your garden and tend to it until it sprouts a berry. You must feed this berry to your mother, or she will perish. You must use the help of Bumberine on your journey." At this moment, the golden package the crow had dropped in her hand burst open, and a small yellow bumblebee flew out and perched on the girl's shoulder. The crow shook its feathers, gave the girl one last piercing look, and flew away, crowing in a strange sort of way. The girl stared after it, wondering if what the crow said was true. Throughout the next couple of days, the girl observed her mother closely, the words from the crow echoing in her head and the bee buzzing in her ear. She didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, but she had this strange feeling in the pit of her stomach that something was wrong. Just as the last bag of vegetables was passed over the garden fence, the girl heard Bumberine buzzing a curious riddle in her ear. "Once for the tree, once for the bark, plant the sliver and see its mark. Head deep into the forest and find the source. A terrible fate shall be decided henceforth." The girl listened to the bee and decided to trust it. She was young and could not fathom how she would survive if her mother was indeed to perish. After her mother's back was turned, she rapidly strode into the woods and began to walk through the trees. She soon realized that all the trees looked approximately the same, and wondered how she would discover which of these trees was the oldest. She tried everything she could to tell them apart, but found it was hopeless, and sat down in despair in a patch of wildflowers. Just then, she heard Bumberine whisper into her ear, "Shake the flowers, see their dust, follow the pollen and reward your trust." The girl shook the stems and discovered the pollen dust rising formed a line pointing to the east. She followed the dust and found it led her directly to the widest tree she had ever seen. No less than 5 men would have to stretch their arms around to encompass it. She wondered how she would retrieve the bark from the center ring when all of a sudden the tree made a sighing, creaking sound. The bee flew from her shoulder into the suddenly formed small hollow on the tree's trunk. It returned with the tiniest piece of bark clutched in its feet. All at once, the tree began to crumble and disappear as if it was being sucked right into the ground. The girl watched with fearful eyes as the ground slowly consumed the tree until there was nothing left. The girl and the bee started to return home, with the bee whispering the riddle as they traveled. "Once for the tree, once for the bark, plant the sliver and see its mark. Head deep into the forest and find the source. A terrible fate shall be decided henceforth." The girl planted the sliver in their garden at once, and her mother returned to their daily lives. The more time passed, the more the sliver grew. The girl began to notice her mother acting very peculiarly. She looked completely normal, but something was just a little off. One morning, the girl found that the sliver had bloomed and sprouted into an herb Paris with a single juicy berry in the petal's center. That same morning, the girl and her mother discovered that each vegetable they pulled up had a dark red stain stemming from its roots. The women were forced to throw out nearly all of their supply and went to bed with their stomachs grumbling. The young girl woke up the next morning and startled to find her mother standing next to the bed, watching her. She held out a plate. The berry from the herb Paris was on it, split into 2. "My child," she said, "have a bite." The girl refused, knowing her mother needed to eat the berry. The more the girl refused, the more the mother pushed. until she finally slammed the plate down to the ground and let out a deep, unnatural scream. The girl leaped to her feet and ran, straight out of the house and into the forest. She ran through the woods, tearing her clothes and dirtying her face, running as fast as she could until she collapsed on a log in the middle of a path. All of a sudden, she heard a faint buzz. She looked up and saw Bumberine flying towards her. She hadn't even realized she was without the bee. The bee landed on her shoulder and began to speak. "Young girl, I must ask for your forgiveness. The devil appeared to me one night and told me he would rip off my wings if I did not do as he instructed, and so I went with him to your cottage. He has been deceiving you since the start and poisoned your mother with the very berry he claims you seek. You must go to find Morbach, who lives at the peak of Zugspitz, for he is the most wise in all the animal kingdom and will surely be able to help you." The young girl stood up and looked at the bee. "Bumberine, I forgive you. You were acting in fear, and I cannot blame you. I deeply thank you for the advice you had given me, and if you would accompany me on this next journey, I shall surely return the favor for you." Bumberine buzzed in agreement, and the two continued down the path together. The journey was difficult. The sun soon set, and when they reached the peak of Zugspitz, they were exhausted. They happened upon a hollowed-out cave in the mountain and went inside, shivering from the cold. All of a sudden, the wind began to roar and cry as if it were alive. It wailed so loudly she was unsure if she would ever hear again. She cried out, "Morbach, Morbach, heed my cries! I have been wronged and need to find a right. The devil has tricked me. My mother's in danger. Please, Morbach, give me the knowledge to be a noble avenger." The wind stopped howling, and a large dark figure emerged from behind a rock. The girl had heard its raspy voice echo through the cave. "Indeed, young girl, I have heard of your confliction. The winds brought word of your mother's depiction. You have traveled far and wide to change your fate, but forgot to realize the steps already in place. Your journey nears its close, but one person more remains behind your household door. She is not who you have known her to be. Another disguises within. It's hard to see. Take with you a gift from me. The magic you seek is in the bee." With this being said, the bee began to glow as if it had eaten the sun. The girl excitedly thanked Morbach and ran back down the path through the trees. She soon arrived at the cottage and discovered the body of her mother lying still on the floor. She dropped to her knees in shock, shaking Bumberine and causing its glowy pollen to spread over her body. Suddenly, her mother transformed into a pile of fiery bones, and the young girl realized that the devil had been disguising in her mother's body. At once she heard a thumping noise coming from the garden. She strode outside and discovered her mother had been trapped in the shed. Word of their story spread throughout the land until it reached the king, who sent a carriage to their cottage to request their presence at his castle. The king praised the young girl for her bravery in defeating their enemy, and allotted her a large sum of money, which she took and bought a plot of land for her mother and her to grow new vegetables and fruits. The young girl became a legend of her town, selling more goods than they ever had before, and they lived the rest of their lives comfortably, as wealthy as they pleased, happily ever after. The end.